Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our reopening panel discussion this evening. We are so looking forward to responding to your questions about the reopening of the Guilderland Central Schools in September. So welcome everyone who is watching this evening and for everyone who sent questions in for us. So before we begin, I'd like to take a little bit of time to introduce our esteemed panel. And I'm going to ask each of them to just give the community a little wave so we know who you are. And I'm going to start with our high school principal, Mr. Mike Piscatelli. And next is our assistant superintendent for instruction, Dr. Damian Singleton. And next is our communications specialist, Mrs. Amy Peratt. And next is our food service director, Ms. Megan Beck. And next we have our Director of Pupil Personnel Services, Mrs. Lisa Knowles. And next is our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. Regan Johnson. And next is Mrs. Mary Zwagerman. She is our head nurse in the district and the nurse at Guilderland Elementary School. And next we have our Director of Transportation, Danielle Poirier. And next is our safety specialist, Mr. Tim Murphy. And then we have Mr. Robert Winans, Bob Winans, who's our instructional administrator for music. Followed by Marcia Ranieri. She is our instructional administrator for world languages and ENL. And next is Michael Laster, the principal of Farnsworth Middle School. And next is Mr. Neil Sanders. He's our assistant superintendent for business. And next is Mr. Clifford Nooney, our director of facilities. And last but certainly not least is our principal from Guilderland Elementary School, Dr. Alan Lockwood. So thank you, panelists, for being here tonight. And if we can take a minute, I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen and we'll walk through kind of an overview of our plans so far, and then we will turn our attention to the questions that were submitted for this evening. So if you can all just be patient with me for a second here while I get our PowerPoint up. All right, here we are, everyone. So once again, let me welcome you all to our reopening of schools panel presentation. Today is August 20th. This is actually the third of these panel presentations we've done this week for our community, and we've been just thrilled to have so many people tuning in to hear about our plans for the start of school. So here's what we'll be working with this evening. Our agenda will include just a brief summary of our reopening of schools process, and then a brief summary of our reopening of schools plan. And we'll include a closer look at health and safety, school schedules, our K-12 instructional programs, student support services, and non-instructional services. And then for the balance of the evening, we're going to turn to the questions that were submitted to us for this session, and our co-chairs will address them. And then also for those of you who are watching, and if something that you hear triggers another question, you can send it during this program to the address up on the screen, reopening@guilderlandschools.net. And if time permits, we can answer some additional questions toward the end of our program. So without further ado, let me talk a little bit about our process. Back in May, we created a reopening of schools steering committee that's been meeting every Friday morning for the last several weeks to begin the process of thinking about reopening schools. In June, we quickly learned that this was a monumental task, so we expanded our team of workers with 6 subcommittees, and you can see the areas that they focused on: facilities, instruction, health and safety, social and emotional health, human resources, and extracurricular activities, and special areas in athletics. We had over 120 stakeholders who gave up all kinds of time and their expertise and their energy and their commitment to our school community to help us think through this very complex task. So my thanks to all of them for their help in our decision-making work. So the process, the most recent series of events, I guess, begins with the submission of our plan to the State Education Department and the Department of Health. That was due on July 31st, and we in fact submitted it on July 31st. And to this point, we haven't received any formal feedback from them, which is, as I understand, a sign that our plan has been approved as submitted. Then on August 7th, the governor came out with his declaration that schools in New York State can in fact open. And he used the infection rate of 5% or less on a rolling 14-day average as the metric that he would use as the upper limit where it would be okay for us to open. And I will just point out that as of today, the rate, and actually I said New York State here, but this is actually the capital region, as of today is 0.6%. And in Albany County, that happens to be 0.5% today. The other metric that the governor used is the one that will determine if schools in a region will close, and that's if the infection rate goes over 9% using a 7-day average. And then 3 other elements that he mentioned in his announcement on the 7th, and that had to do with posting 3 elements of our plan in a prominent place on our website. Those 3 elements are our remote instruction plans, our testing plans, and our contact tracing plans. And those, in fact, are on the front page of our website. And then the last 2 bullets here have to do with these informational sessions that you're participating in right now. So we thank you again for joining us. So just a recap of our plan principles, really 3 things were our guiding direction. The first, obviously, is our commitment to adhere to state level guidelines to ensure the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff. All of our work goes back to that principle. But we also thought about how it's possible for us to maximize instructional opportunities for all students. But we, in fact, prioritized in-person instruction for our youngest learners and those who might need some additional assistance. And last, we planned with flexibility in mind. We have experienced and will likely continue to experience the need to make adjustments based on changes with the status of the virus and also with questions and challenges that emerge as we flesh out the details of these plans. So flexibility is a must. So let me start with our very top priority, and that is the health and safety of our faculty, staff, and students. And this first image is really the starting point for all of the work that we did. When we received the final guidance from the State Education Department in mid-July, it included a very important piece of data around social distancing and the requirement that we maintain 6 feet of distance between individuals in a classroom. And with that metric, every other decision that we have made, it fell from that. So there you see one of our elementary classrooms, and you can see the measuring stick across those 2 desks indicating 6 feet of space between. So I note that in our typical classrooms, which are 750 square feet, that means that we can accommodate approximately 14 students in such a classroom. I do want to make sure to point out that we do have classrooms that are larger than 750 square feet. And so some classrooms may have more than 14 students. We are committed to maintaining the 6-foot spacing. So it's 14 isn't the magic number, 6 feet is the magic number. Of course, that number doubles if we're talking about physical education or music, especially singing and the playing of wind instruments. We do need to follow a recommendation to maintain 12 feet of space when engaged in those activities. And then some other social distancing provisions we have it put into our plan, and that has to do with signage, marking maximum capacity for some of our smaller spaces, signage that reminds individuals to stay 6 feet apart, especially in areas of potential congregation. And then we're also using directional arrows to help with traffic flow in our hallways. And of course, those are tied to our fire safety and evacuation plans. Another critical element of our health and safety plans have to do with face coverings. And face coverings need to be worn at all times by staff, students, and visitors when 6 feet can't be maintained. And for students, they will only be allowed to remove their face coverings while they're eating, and then for short mask breaks that we will be asking our faculty and staff to manage during the day for our children. If we encourage everyone to bring and wear their own face coverings, but we have a tremendous supply of face coverings available for staff and students if they're needed, and that of course is at no cost. And if you are planning to buy your own face coverings, please note this bullet. It's very important that acceptable face coverings include cloth-based coverings and surgical masks that will cover both your nose and mouth, and they need to fit well. But bandanas, single ply gaiters, and masks that have an exhalation valve are not acceptable. So please don't plan on having your children wear those to school. And a question we get all the time is, what if a child refuses to wear his or her mask? So almost everything that we're talking about in terms of the maintaining the health and safety and a healthy and safe environment in our schools has to do with behavior. And wearing a mask is no different. We will work with children who are struggling to wear a mask or who refuse to wear a mask and help them understand that it's not only for their safety and well-being, but for everyone around them. I mean, one of the reasons schools can even open is because of these health and safety provisions that we all need to collectively support and follow. In the worst case scenario, if a child refuses to wear a mask, it may be that the child should consider the full remote option for school attendance, and we'll be talking more about that in this presentation. But that is, a last resort, but it is something that we may need to consider, and that would be true both for wearing a mask in the classroom or on a bus or in any other place within our school facilities. We're also going to be asking all of our faculty, staff, and students to complete a daily health screening attestation. A link will be sent to everyone each day via a school messenger. You can pick your preference of a text, an email, or a phone call, and it will ask you to respond to a few simple questions about symptoms that you may or may not feel, contact with someone who may have tested positive, travel to locations that are on the 14-day quarantine, and so on. We very much will depend on our families to be partners with the completion of the daily health screening attestation. Really important for you to help us with this. If students have not completed it, we will have to track them down at school and do that process at school, which will be a lot to do while we're trying to do so much else. So please, families, I know this is one more thing we're asking you to do in the morning, a busy time, but please be our partners in this work. And then any student or staff member with signs of COVID-19 will be assessed in a designated isolation area. We have a designated one in each of our buildings, and he or she will be sent home for follow-up with a healthcare provider. So the COVID-19 testing itself will be done by either a healthcare provider or at one of the designated Department of Health testing sites. I know at one point the governor suggested that schools would be COVID-19 testing sites. This is not the case at this point. We are not equipped to do that. So we will be helping families connect with their care provider or the Department of Health for that testing. Should we have a positive COVID-19 test, we would immediately notify the Albany County Department of Health, and vice versa. If they are made aware of a positive test of one of our school community members, they would notify us. And with that positive test, that's when we would begin the process of contact tracing. The school district does not actually do the contact tracing, but we provide the Department of Health with the information that they need to do so. And that would include things like accurate attendance records for staff and students, student and staff schedules, log of visitors, transportation ridership data, and so on. It's really important to point out that confidentiality must be maintained. It's required by both state and federal law. So we cannot release the information about an individual who has tested positive. And by that, I mean we can't release names. Should we have a positive case, we will certainly alert our faculty, staff, students, and families as soon as we know that, so we can begin contemplating the next question, which I hear a lot, and that is, how do we make the decision to close schools? So should we have a positive case or cases discovered in our schools, we begin close consultation with the Department of Health to determine the extent and duration of a potential closure. And the questions we're going to consider are listed there for you. It's the number of cases, the location within a building, and the amount of contact with other individuals that person may have had. All of those things will be taken into consideration to figure out if we're closing a classroom, a wing, a hallway, a whole building, or the entire district. The other metric that I mentioned earlier that would close all schools in the region, this could be ordered if the regional infection rate rises over 9%. We have other health and safety measures that are part of our plan as well, and that's training on proper hand and respiratory hygiene, proper use of facial coverings, social distancing, and symptoms of COVID-19, and we'll provide that training to both our students and our staff. School visitors will be restricted, and those who are able to enter the building or who do enter the building will need to wear facial coverings, and they'll also have to complete our health screening attestation. And then we will continue to clean our school buildings and disinfect them, also following CDC guidance. And then the last section here around health and safety is related to ventilation. This has become a huge topic of conversation of late around this as we think about health and safety in various buildings. But I want to assure you that our current ventilation system operates as it was designed to, and we do follow all of our energy code requirements. And on average, the air in our classrooms is exchanged 4 times per hour, which is quite a bit. We're actually thinking about what we might do to increase that even further and exchange the air 5 times per hour. That has consequences, though, around maintaining comfort, because the more air you bring in, the harder it is to keep the temperature warm enough in winter and cool enough in the warmer months. Our system currently uses MERV 8 filters. These are changed 2 times per year minimally. We are reviewing higher MERV rating filters for our system. There has been discussion that MERV 13 would actually be effective in helping screen COVID-19 out of the air. There is actually no proof that that is the case, but it is talked about a lot. We are looking at 9 and 11 because those would be levels that we can use without adversely affecting how our units actually operate. So a big topic of discussion. We're learning about this all the time. All right, I'm going to transition now to our school schedules for the opening of school. And I'll start here This is more for our employees, but good to know that September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd will be superintendent's conference days for our faculty and staff. And you can see what we'll be working on during that time: planning and preparation, training around procedures and protocols, and we'll also be doing some professional development around remote learning and technology integration. September 4th is the Friday before Labor Day. There will be no school, and faculty and staff will not be reporting that day. And then last week, we announced that we would be initiating a phased-in start to our 2020-2021 school year. And September 8, 9, 10, and 11 are going to be remote only for our K-12 students. Plus, we're going to use this time to provide an extra opportunity for all of our children who are entering buildings for the first time this fall. So that's our kindergarten children, our grade 5 students who are moving up to the middle school, as are our grade 6 students, and then our grade 8 students who are moving to Guilderland High School, along with our 9th grade students. And we will be hosting some in-person orientation opportunities for these children on those days. The schedules will be sent by the building principals shortly so families can plan. Transportation will be provided for our grade 5 through 9 students, so 5, 6, 8, and 9. Our kindergarten families will welcome the children and a parent to come and visit each of the buildings. And then this PowerPoint will be posted up to our website, so I won't spend a ton of time going through each of the data points on this slide, but our elementary schedules are there for you. We have a staggered start. This is all a function of the number of children we can fit on a bus and maintain appropriate distancing. So we have K2 starting first, then 3, 4. Grade 5, again, will be at Farnsworth Middle School in its own designated area, beginning at 8:55. And then our middle level schedules, grade 6 will be at Farnsworth Middle School for daily instruction. Grade 7 will be at Farnsworth Middle School. We'll have alternating days. Half of the students on each team will be in every other day for in-person instruction, and then the following day for remote. And the same is true for our 8th grade students, except they will be housed at Guilderland High School in the 100 wing. They will have that spot all to themselves, so they can be separated from the rest of the high school population. And they too will be 1 day in person, 1 day remote, half the class each day. And here's just a snapshot of what a 6th grade schedule will look like in the fall. And a quick shot of what a 7th grade schedule will look like in the fall. These are 8-period days. And then here is a 9th grade schedule. Just point out that second row, 11:43 to 1:34. It's a long block of time. It would include both lunch and a course. So in A and B, you see lunch again with social studies. And then on days C and D, lunches with science. And then here is the high school schedule. Grades 9 through 12, they will be located in Guilderland High School, excluding the 100 wing. And again, they will be alternating every other day, and their division is by alphabet. Couple more things about the high school schedule. We're really pleased to be able to share with everyone that we're running the master schedule based on the student requests that were submitted last year. So we'll be able to offer all scheduled courses, and they will be taught in the hybrid model, which is 1 day in person, 1 day remote, and then fully remote as well. And you can see how we'll break them down by alphabet. Group 1 will be A through K, Group 2 will be L through Z, and they'll come in every other day for instruction. And then for our students who are 100% remote, they will be a part of the assigned class. They'll be assigned to group 1 or 2, and they will follow the schedule for that assigned class. And here you can see a sample of what the first week would look like. And you can see at the bottom, group 1 and group 2 alternating face-to-face and remote. And again, here's a snapshot of week 2. So let's talk a little bit about the instructional programs themselves, beginning with elementary. For our students who will be on site, they will be assigned to a grade level team of teachers and instructional cohorts of approximately 14 students. And again, that's based on the size of the classroom. Students will remain in cohorts throughout the day. That's an important health and safety consideration. They'll receive their special area instruction as you see listed there, and that will be pushed into their classrooms. The guidance that we've received from CDC and the State Education Department have said it's best to have our children in one location and the teachers coming to them. For physical education, though, that's not possible. So we will be doing PE in our gymnasiums where we have more space, and that'll be twice a week for 30 minutes. And then just a reminder for our 5th grade parents who are watching that 5th grade will be located at Farnsworth Middle School, but they'll be following an elementary program of study. They'll be clustered by their school, and they'll be taught by their respective elementary teachers. Elementary students who choose the remote option or whose parents choose the remote option will be using the instructional platform of Google Classroom or Seesaw. We've been able to designate grade level teachers to provide that remote instruction. And that instruction will include daily class meetings and then instruction in all content areas. And you can see the breakdown there. It'll be a mix of both synchronous and asynchronous. And later in the program, I'll be asking our team to provide some more detail about this. And then middle level for on-site, students in grade 6 attend every day. But we're still honoring our commitment to the middle school model, so they will be assigned to a house and a team. Again, they'll be placed in cohorts of approximately 14 students to maintain social distancing. And the day will begin with homeroom, and will follow an 8-period school day. And the chart in the bottom, on the left-hand side, you can see where it says all students. Those are the areas of study that we've always offered our middle school students, all of our middle school students. And then on the right of that chart, you'll see that some students also participate in academic intervention services or special education services, English as a new language, enrichment, band, chorus, and orchestra. So middle level, grade 7 on site, they will attend every other day. They'll remain in a house and a team. Same with the cohorts, and very similar to 6th grade, except that it's on the alternating day. And then grade 8, again, very similar, except these students will be meeting at Guilderland High School, and rather than an 8-period day, they will be on a block schedule. For our remote learners, students in grades 6 through 8 will follow a daily schedule. It includes the same required coursework as those who will be with us in person. We've been able to dedicate a remote teaching team for our remote learners. We'll be using Google Classroom, and the instruction will be a blend of live instruction and some offline activities and assignments that will be completed by students. And daily attendance will be taken and student work will be graded. And then the high school, again, in-person classes of about 14. Remote students will be part of in-person instruction to the extent that we can. And we're going to use a wide variety of instructional strategies, which are listed there. Some live video teaching, pre-recorded video teaching, Google Meet discussions, and so on. We do have instruction in our special areas, and we have other activities planned as well. As I said earlier, PE requires 12 feet of physical distancing, so we'll be maintaining that. And same for singing and playing wind instruments. We will need to honor that recommendation. And then for extracurricular activities and athletics, we are committed to offering as many of our extracurricular activities as we can safely do. Many of those will be conducted virtually. As for athletics, we are expecting an announcement soon, I hear, but as of today, the interscholastic sports are not permitted, and the start of the fall season has been delayed until at least September 21st. But again, stay tuned. I understand an announcement's coming next week. So a few more important pieces of information about the services we'll have available to support our students. We will continue to serve our students who have individual education plans, IEPs. Students in grades K-6 will receive their special ed services via daily in-person instruction. And our students in grades 7-12 will follow the same hybrid model as their peers, supported by special ed faculty case managers. And we've also prioritized our K-12 students in our self-contained special ed programs to come to school for daily in-person instruction where they would receive their services. But we also understand that families have the choice to have their students participate fully remotely, and we will collaborate with families to make sure their children receive the special education support services that are in their IEP and that they need. We also have many students in Guilderland who are learning English as a new language, and we will continue to serve them as well. The units of instruction for them will be determined on their most recent proficiency level, and they'll receive those services whether they are here in person or remote. We have made it a priority to provide daily in-person learning for our ELLs who have some special challenges, and want to make very clear that we'll make every effort possible to translate documents for families who speak one of our top 10 languages in the district. And I just want to point out, we have one of our ENL teachers who has been watching these presentations and transcribing them so they can be posted to our website, where we have a translation feature for all their documents there. So for our families for whom English is a new language, there is a resource for them to get this information as well. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about social emotional support in this time of uncertainty and so much happening in our world. We want to make sure that we have many things in place to provide support for our faculty, staff, and students. We have a committee that focused just on this absolutely essential part of our work. So we're going to do all we can to provide resources and referrals to address mental health and other concerns. Our advisory committee has put together numerous recommendations to help across the district. Some of those include, and this is just a small sample, time for teachers to develop relationships with students, professional development opportunities, and then the potential review and revision of our K-12 comprehensive counseling plan. We also want to provide families with information on how to prepare children for a return to live or remote instruction. And we've recently just posted a what to expect kind of document that provides some very family-friendly tips on encouraging students to social distance, to do appropriate greetings to their friends, to wear masks appropriately. So it's a wonderful resource, and we really appreciate the good work of that committee. So a couple more things about some non-instructional aspects of our work, and one of them is transportation. So I just remind everyone that students, school bus drivers and attendants all need to wear a face covering on the bus. We will do social distancing to the extent that we can on a bus. As you know, the metric is 6 feet, but school buses are only 7 feet wide. So it is to the extent practicable. It's why a face covering is so important. To help with the social distancing, we're only going to have one child per seat, except for siblings who can sit together. And this means it's approximately 20 students per bus. And that's why we have the next bullet, which is the staggered runs by grade level. We can talk some more about how that played out and why we need to do that. But it comes down to the limited ridership on each of the buses. And then we will clean and disinfect the buses once a day, and the high contact spots will be wiped down after morning and afternoon runs. And last but not least, lots of questions about school lunch. Want to point out that students will be eating lunch in their classrooms. They'll be picking up their food in the cafeteria on trays that have lids, a new innovation that we have to keep down spillage in the hallways. And we're going to have students pre-order their choices. For our older students, they'll use our school cafe system. And at the younger levels in their elementary schools, we'll be looking at using a Google Sheet to gather that information. We're going to try to limit the exchange of cash at the register and really encourage people to use our online payment methods. And then, of course, we will require students to wash their hands prior to eating lunch. Always good idea under any circumstance. And then for our students who have elected to be fully remote, they can pick up their meals from either Farnsworth Middle School or Guilderland High School on Mondays. And I just want to point out our families who have applied for and qualified for free and reduced lunch can in fact get their meals and a free and reduced plan. If you have not qualified though, there is expectation that families will pay for those meals. Okay, so we have come to the end of our prepared comments. I just want to thank you again for all the questions that you submitted and your support and patience as we work through all of the details of reopening our schools. We truly can't wait to have your children back with us. But we know you have lots of questions. So I have shared the questions that came in during the week with the panel. And I'll facilitate question and answer based on those questions that you submitted. And again, if you have additional thoughts you would like to have responded to the extent we have time, you can send them to reopening@guilderlandschools.net. So I'm going to say thank you for joining us, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll rejoin our panel. Okay, everybody still there? This esteemed panel has heard this presentation several times this week. I could have just said, pick it up. Someone just fill in for me, but I didn't do that. All right, so we have several questions here, but many of the questions touched on the idea or the notion of what will remote learning look like in Guilderland schools when we start up again in September. So what I'm going to ask is that I'll start with Dr. Singleton, then I'll have each of the principals, elementary, middle, and high, jump in and try to paint a picture for our viewers of, so what exactly will this look like? So Dr. Singleton, you get to go first.
All right, my honor. Thank you, Dr. Wiles. I'll try not to reiterate some of the information that you've already shared in the presentation. You touched upon quite a bit there, but I'll just again remind the community that we have just under 23% of our families who have opted for remote learning, with about 77% who will be coming into our schools for in-person learning. I'll also reiterate that all of the teachers who will be assigned to remote learning will be New York State certified, and at this point, we're anticipating that they will all be Guilderland teachers. So the remote learning experience for our students, as you said, is likely to be a blend of both live or synchronous learning experiences with activities that we would deem asynchronous. As our instructional task force has done its work throughout the course of the summer, I think we've realized that there is not one singular mode of delivery for remote learning, that there are actually multiple approaches to doing so. Some of them, as I said, would be the form of live streaming, which inevitably will be a primary focus for a lot of our instruction, that being synchronous in nature. But we also recognize that our teachers have opportunity to do some things that are a little more asynchronous in nature. So things like pre-recorded lessons may come into play at times. Our teachers may do some screencasts where they're actually utilizing what's on their computer screen to demonstrate learning. And just as an example, I know some parents might be familiar with the likes of Khan Academy, those types of things, but Khan Academy is essentially that. It's a pre-recorded lesson, oftentimes using a screencasting mechanism. So that's just kind of a visual. If anyone wants to check that out, they can get a sense of what that feels like. So again, asynchronous blended with the synchronous learning experiences. I'd say the primary difference from what was experienced back in the spring is that we will be expecting our remote students to follow the full curriculum that we will be following in person. So this means at the elementary level, we will have science instruction, social studies instruction. We also are still required to provide art, physical education, and music, which we will do so remotely as well. Again, likely a blend of asynchronous with synchronous learning activities. I do think it's really important, however, to make mention that as we engage our remote learners, there are definitely going to be some components of instruction that we simply cannot replicate from in-person learning. So when you think about a full class of students, whether it be at the elementary level or even up through the high school level, our classrooms are rich with discussion and conversation. There's a lot of peer-to-peer interaction, all of which are very critical to the learning process for our students. And those are difficult to replicate in a virtual environment. We will certainly do our best to do that and engage students remotely through class discussions via Google Meets, those types of applications, but it's very difficult to truly replicate that. But again, we will do our very best with that. So a couple of other key points, again, for our students at the elementary level, we will be looking at the full curriculum. There will definitely be some opportunities for live engagement with their teachers. There will be class meetings that will take place pretty much every day. The teachers at the elementary level will be utilizing one of two platforms. At the primary level, grades K through 2, I would say, potentially a little bit in third grade. Seesaw is a predominant platform, very interactive. It's definitely one that our primary teachers enjoy using and have found to be very effective in engaging both students and parents at home. But once you get up to third grade, up through grade 12, Google Classroom will become the predominant platform for distribution of instructional materials, for engagement of our students who will be working remotely. The other important point that I think we want to make is that we are very cognizant of the stress and the strain, I would say, that comes with being online for extended periods of time. So we are very cognizant of the need to find an appropriate balance with our students with, you know, an abundant amount of screen time, with things that they don't have to necessarily be on screen for. So we do want our students to remain active. We do want them to be doing things that are not necessarily screen-based. So, you know, various assignments, projects, activities will be assigned to our students at home so that it's not entirely, you know, staring at the screen, which we find some diminishing returns with that as students do that over extended periods of time, and especially for months on end. So we're very well aware of that. I think that really is kind of the gist of what we're looking at this point for remote learning. You know, as challenging as it may be at times, we also recognize that there will be some great opportunities to engage our learners at home, and we look forward to doing so. So I would say that's the overview. But I welcome any input from middle school, high school, or elementary school as well.
Dr. Lockwood, can you talk a little bit about what the elementary will look like? We have a question from a parent. They're wondering, who will the teachers have both remote students and in-person students at the elementary level?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. And right now, we are aligning our staffing in a way that teachers who are working with remote students will be dedicated to just the remote students. And likewise, the in-person teachers will just be working with the students who are present in the school buildings. Dr. Singleton, I didn't hear if you had said this, but I do want to remind folks again that some of our cohorts right now that we're putting together for the remote learners will be made up of students from multiple buildings, limited to 2 buildings at this point in time. And we are certainly working to make sure that it's not just 1 or 2 students from any building that are mixed in with another cohort, but relatively equal-sized groups from 2 buildings that would make up 1 remote cohort. And I just wanted to say that just like our in-person teachers and the work that they do with students every year, our remote teachers are going to spend a lot of time relationship building with those cohorts and building a sense of community. As Dr. Singleton said, it'll be a little bit different than our in-person students, but it's very important to us that there is a sense of community in all of the instructional cohorts that we have moving forward this year.
Thanks, Alan. Mr. Lester, can you talk a little bit about the middle school approach and what will A day and B day or remote day and not remote day, what will that look like for a learner?
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Wiles. In addition to what Dr. Singleton said, I think at the middle school right now, the numbers of students and families who have requested remote learning, we're going to be able to accommodate that by basically having at least 1 full remote team per grade level. In addition, we have enough remote requests that there will be some teams at the middle school that will have a combination of both remote learners as well as live instruction. So, in addition to some of the flipped learning, options and the different strategies that we're going to use, having the students come to the middle school every other day allows us to be able to, have that continuity of instruction continue even though it is remote. So we envision some flipped learning opportunities, some project-based learning extension activities. There will be some live opportunities to meet with teachers on the off remote day for sure, but we anticipate that being flexible as well as live opportunities for both. So, in terms of an A and B day schedule, it's going to be like a normal middle school schedule. On an A day, you will take a certain number of your courses with a certain number of your encore classes, and then on the B day, you would take your other encore class. So if you look at the sample schedules that are online, a student will be taking a full program of studies and be able to participate in all those classes on a regular rotation as they would have in previous years.
So Mike, if a student has English on day 1 in person, later in the week, would they have English language arts remotely? So
Yeah,
you do both? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way it's going to work.
And then what about enrichment at the middle level?
So middle level enrichment at the 6th grade level, we anticipate enrollment potentially decreasing because unfortunately we did not have second semester grades, standard-based report card to analyze. So all we have to go with is our 5th grade teacher recommendations at this point. Our morning enrichment opportunities that are structured to be large group, unfortunately, we don't know if we're going to be able to do that with our remote learners. We will be able to participate in National History Day competitions. They have a fairly robust virtual platform that we've already participated in. So that would definitely be an option for our remote learners. But I know our enrichment teacher and our supervisor are researching options to see what else we can provide for our remote learners in that area. So.
And then one more for you, Mr. Lester. What about homework? Are middle schoolers going to have homework?
Yeah, I think the transition to middle school does include a little bit of homework as an extension of what's happening during the school day. I don't see that changing. Each individual learner obviously will have to work with their team teachers and their counselors to determine how best to get that done. So I think that homework, the transition to middle level homework will be just as normal as it was in every other school year. So,
All right. I'm sure the middle schoolers are thrilled to hear that.
yeah, I'm sorry to burst everybody's bubble tonight, but that's going to continue.
All right, thank you. Mr. Piscatelli, what will remote learning look like at the high school?
Well, as Dr. Singleton was talking about, it's going to be a mixture of instructional strategies, and it's going to really be dependent on what the learning objectives are for those lessons. There may be some days where remember, with the way we're structuring 8th grade through 12th grade is we have 2 groups. One group will be live, the other group will be remote, and then the next day they will be repeating those same group of classes, but group 2 now will be live and group 2 will be live and group 1 will be remote. So there may be some days where we bring in the remote group and we do synchronous teaching and they're both there, one's remote, one's face-to-face, and there may be other days where, as Dr. Singleton said, we've pre-recorded something, but we're going to ask them to turn something in during that time period. There was a question in the document that I wanted to address about why are we saying follow your schedule? And one of the reasons, there's a couple of reasons why I want you to follow your schedule is, number one, we want the students to engage during the time that your class is scheduled so that they have the opportunity to interact with their teacher. Because as we move through the day, the teachers are going to shift to different groups of students. The second thing is that we have a requirement to take attendance during each instructional block. So we want to make sure that we have things built in to take attendance during those time periods.
Mr. Piscatelli, we also had a question about labs. How will lab experience be done if we have a student who's doing remote learning?
Well, we're using some virtual platforms. We're using something called Explore Learning. So that's going to be, we're going to certainly do some virtual labs through that medium. We also are exploring ideas where the teacher is going to provide the experimental data, and then the students are going to take that data home and apply it to the lab activity. And like I said, it's going to be a mixture of live and remote. For our remote students, it's going to be primarily a virtual experience.
All right, thank you for that. I have one more for you, and that is thinking about our students who are entering 9th grade and they're part of an accelerated program. What kind of opportunities and courses will they have to not only focus on their academics, but also to build peer relationships and engage in the culture of the high school?
Well, first of all the programs that were originally planned to be offered are being offered. So the students who are accelerated are going to be in those courses. And part of all of our programs is the component of group work, class discussion, interacting with peers. So obviously the classwork itself presents the opportunity to get to know your classmates, build relationships there. But we also are still planning on continuing our co-curricular activities. They'll be done virtually, at least at the beginning of the school year, so students will have an opportunity to meet classmates through those activities as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Mrs. Knowles, can I put you on the spot to talk a little bit about remote learning for our children who have IEPs?
Absolutely. Certainly, we've been able to look at our remote learning groups and have teachers assigned to those groups or teams to support the students with IEPs. I imagine there'll be a lot of work on the back end, making sure the work that's presented to them is accessible and adapted or modified to meet their needs. All of our special ed students have a case manager or an advocate who is the primary point of contact for families, whether it's a special ed teacher or a related service provider. So we are going to be collaborating a lot with our gen ed partners to ensure that our students' needs are met.
Thank you. That's great. Mrs. Ranieri, can you do the same for our ENL students who will be remote?
Absolutely. Thank you. So for our Ls, they will be receiving similar services as if they were in the school building. In school, they'll have the ENL teacher that'll work alongside with the classroom teacher. So there'll be a lot of collaboration, folks working together to make sure that our English language learners receive prioritized education. In addition to that, if they're remote, the ENL teacher will be with them for a portion of the day as well, either along with the classroom teacher or in addition to the classroom teacher. So that's how our ENL instruction is going to work.
Thanks so much, Marcia. Let me also, Mr. Winans, can you talk a little bit, again, sticking with the remote piece, how our special area courses are going to work, things like art, music?
Well, you know, we're happy to say that we're maintaining our program of studies, and then as Dr. Singleton said before, it will be a blend of synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities. We definitely want to increase the synchronous learning opportunities over what we were able to offer when school closed in the spring. One thing that I will definitely say is, because it's a question that I've received many times, is about instrumental lessons. And so if you are doing full remote and you are an instrumentalist in grades 4 through 12, or if you are a singer in grades 9 through 12, which are the ensembles where we have pull-out lessons, you will still get your pull-out lesson every week. So that will be done on its normal rotational basis, and that will be a live virtual lesson done over Google Meets with a lesson group.
Awesome. That's awesome. I'd like to sit in on some of those. I think it would be fun. Can you comment at all about how we'll be delivering art instruction?
I can certainly try.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So I believe that art will also be a blend of synchronous and asynchronous learning, depending on the grade level, depending on the course, will be probably pushed out in different ways.
All right. Sorry for putting you on the spot there. Mr. Austin, who I didn't introduce at the beginning of the program, he is our Director of Physical Education, Health, and Athletics. Can you talk a little bit about physical education in a remote world?
Sure. Well, you know, one of the things that our teachers, you know, commented about the remote experience back in the spring was how much they missed the kids and that human to human connection. So you're going to see more of that for remote learning in PE. We're going to do as much live instruction as we can using Google Meets, Google Classroom, phone calls, etc. And we're going to focus on engaging the kids in ways where we're going to have them do activities that can be done at home with very little equipment, whether it's in their living room or in their front or backyard, stuff that they can do at home. I know we're exploring, you know, some options right now that will engage students, such as, you know, on-demand classes, interactive videos, and those are going to require, they're assignment-based, so they're going to require attendance on the students' parts to complete those. So it's going to look different, but we're excited to get creative and have some changes for remote learning for phys ed here in September, starting in September.
All right, thanks so much. We also had some questions about transitioning from remote to in-person, or in-person back to remote mid-semester. So is that possible? What would it look like when families might want to make a change? Damien, can you talk a little bit about the implications of, first of all, why we asked families to make a decision for an entire semester, and then how that will play out?
Sure, I will happily do that. I think it's important to remind families that really the driving force behind all of the decisions that we're making and all of the plans that we are implementing is the social distancing requirement. So if you start there and consider what that means for classroom space, for square footage, for use of our facilities, Just that one recommendation, that one piece of guidance alone is going to cause a fairly significant ripple effect very, very quickly. So for example, many of our classes run between 20 and 25 students typically. When we socially distance, it means we can only get on average 14 students within a classroom space, which leads us to all of the decisions that we've essentially made. When you think about having students return to school, those who are remote, if we have additional bodies coming into our physical spaces, our classroom spaces, we immediately have to start thinking once again about that social distancing requirement and remaining compliant with that requirement. So even just 2 or 3 additional bodies returning to a classroom space could lead to a ripple effect where we have to regroup students, potentially reassign teachers, move groups of students to different locations and buildings, or potentially to different buildings altogether. That just creates one additional disruption to the experience for our students, and we very much want to try to avoid that scenario. So that right there is one of the reasons why we really are requesting parents to think about that remote experience and try to make a commitment to the district to a full semester, which basically brings us to the mid-year point in the school year. The other pieces of consideration are the fact that we have semester-long courses that run, and there's kind of a clean break there between semesters when it would make sense for us to have some students return, and hopefully minimize the regrouping that may occur if they came midstream during a semester-long course. The other piece is just a health and safety consideration. And when you think about many of the universities, for example, have adjusted their schedules so students are actually going home around Thanksgiving time, not coming back. And if we have students returning, midstream in that first semester, Thanksgiving, December timeframe, that may well be a time frame when we're experiencing some increases in COVID in the region, if not the state. So we really felt from a health and safety perspective that it also made some sense for us to try to see what the longer term picture and prognosis is going to be for the school year going forward.
All right, thank you. That's a great transition to address some of the questions that we have from families whose children will be on site. And one of the questions we have is, will there be an opportunity for my 5th grader to drop off school supplies? And I guess we can extend this to all of our younger learners about dropping off supplies. And also, will this 5th grader and others have a chance for a tour of the building? So Mike, why don't I start with you, and then Alan, we'll shift to you to talk about supply drop-off for our K-4 students.
So next week, we start our transition activities for our 5th and 6th grade students and families. On Monday evening, we will be pushing out a Google Meet link for a virtual transition event for our 6th grade students and families. And then on Tuesday, we'll be doing the same thing for our 5th grade students and families. That virtual event will include an overview of what the FMS community is all about, talking a little bit about the nuts and bolts of what life is going to look like in the 2021 school year for our 5th and 6th graders. So we're really excited to do those 2 engagements on Monday, Tuesday night. On Wednesday, we've coordinated a process where 5th and 6th grade families can sign up on a specific day to come in for a guided tour of FMS, where they can go and see their homeroom and see their classroom. If they're a 5th grade student and family, they're going to go and find certain places around the building that are important to them, such as our house offices, our nurse's office, where the lunch line is, things that kids really need to know. So after that, we also have our orientation program, which will take place in the first 4 days of school that I believe you referenced earlier in the PowerPoint, Dr. Wiles. So our families who are coming to the middle school for the first time will have multiple opportunities to not only get to know us, but also come on in and get to tour the building and get their legs underneath them. So we're really excited to start next week.
All right, thank you, Mike. Alan, can you talk a little bit about supply drop off? I know the elementary principals spoke about it just this morning.
Yeah, we're going to have some opportunities to do that. It's going to look a little bit different than our typical back to school walkthrough nights that we've traditionally hosted. But first and foremost, our kindergarten students are going to have opportunities to visit the school during those first 4 days of remote instruction. And we'll be inviting cohorts of kindergarten students in, ideally with their parents, to come with them so we can talk to parents and make sure that we understand the needs of their children and the transportation requirements for their children. And that will be a great opportunity for the kindergarten students to bring in their supplies and materials and leave them right in the classroom. For the other grade levels, we are working on organizing some evening events where students will be able to drop off supplies. Now, in each of our classrooms to begin with, since we're moving to tables and we have to remove some of the furniture from some of the classroom spaces, we are planning to have boxes for the students to maintain their supplies and keep all their school supplies. What we will probably end up doing is organizing those boxes by grade level and assigning a night and a period of time during those first 4 remote days where parents at a specific grade level will be able to come and locate their child's box for supplies and leave the supplies in there. And we will bring them back down to the classrooms at that point. Unfortunately, with the buildings clean and pristine and ready to welcome all of our students back, we can't just open our doors and allow all of the students and all of the parents back into the building. It would be difficult to maintain social distancing and our safety protocols in that condition. So it will probably be a drop-off event that takes place just outside of the schools.
All right, thank you, Alan. And probably the week of the 8th, is that correct? Excellent. All right, the next series of questions are about schedules and transportation. So Danielle, I'm going to put you front and center here. Can you help our community understand the need for the staggered start times at our buildings, K2, 3, 4, because it does, we recognize, create a challenge for parents who have children in both of those groups for pickup and so on. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Wiles. Well, because of social distancing, we've reduced the capacity that we can carry on a bus to 20 students, perhaps a few more if we have siblings on, which prompted us to have to create a 4th tier. With that, we don't have enough staff or buses, so we had to create the 4th tier, which added length to the day.
So we also had, and maybe Mr. Sanders can jump in on this one, we also had many families who decided they would rather drive their children to school rather than take the bus. And we've had many questions during the week about what this will mean for traffic and congestion at each of the buildings during the morning and the afternoon. So Mr. Sanders, can you talk a little bit about our plans to help facilitate that?
Sure. Well, we've had a lot of experience over the years with a large amount of traffic at our schools as well as our bus traffic. This time, obviously, with the ability to opt out of transportation, we do expect more parents to be bringing their children. We also are seeing reduced student loads on our buses, so we do have less runs, and they're spread out now, so we will have less bus traffic, but we'll have more car traffic. Part of the opt-outs, though, are going to be remote-only students, so those parents will not be bringing their students to school, so some of those transportation opt-outs won't affect the traffic within the building. But also with our staggered start times at the elementary and our alternating days at the secondary level, essentially we will only have half of the traffic that we would have for the full school coming at 2 different times. So we're subdividing the traffic up between those 2 periods, which should help as well. In addition, we've also reached out to the Gildan Police Department. They're our partners on some of these situations involving traffic, so we're going to enlist their help. We're going to be meeting at some schools. We're going to be looking at our traffic patterns. We're going to be trying to identify ways that we can more effectively get traffic in and out of the building, our buses, as well as vehicle traffic, try to create some efficiencies, and maybe we will make some adjustments in terms of the traffic patterns that we've had in the past to try to ease some of the burden. In addition, at the elementary level, we're looking at a tag system where we can match parents or guardians with children, particularly at pickup time. So as parents come up, we'll be able to identify them with a tag that they will be having, and we will be able to locate the child by using that same tag number, quickly unite them so they can get in the car and continue on their way. So we're looking at a lot of efficiencies to try to keep the traffic moving and to cut down on some of the backups and congestion that we've had in the past.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sanders. Danielle, back to you just for a couple quick questions. We had a question about how the cleaning will be done on the buses, and you had mentioned, I think, in one of our sessions about some new devices that we have. And there was also a question about children bringing hand sanitizer on the bus.
Well, yes, we have secured 2 electrostatic sprayers. One is just a handheld model, and the other one is rather robust, and it has 2 hoses that we can spray botanical disinfectant throughout the buses and let it sit for 4 minutes, and it disinfects the buses. That will be done in the middle of the day. And in the meantime, during the runs, if there's time, the drivers will wipe down the high touch surfaces with disinfectant wipes. What was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
Hand sanitizer.
Oh yes, hand sanitizer. Well, hand sanitizer is a flammable liquid, so it is not allowed on the bus for the children and or the drivers.
However, we should let families know, and this will be a transition over to Mr. Nooney, that we have a tremendous supply of hand sanitizer at school. So children should not need to bring it from home. Is that a good transition to you, Mr. Nooney?
That would be a fair statement, Dr. Wiles. Yes, we have all of our classroom spaces will be outfitted with hand sanitizer, and then we will refill those bottles, and we'll have those conversations with staff. Is never throw out a plastic bottle right now. They are a hot commodity. So we actually have smaller bottles for our classrooms, and then we have gallon sizes that our custodial staff will be able to refill those bottles at any time.
Excellent, thank you. And so while I have you, can you, we had a question about the frequency of bathrooms being cleaned. And while I hope you will touch on that, maybe you can talk a little bit more about our plans for keeping our buildings clean during this time.
Yeah, I get all the exciting questions on bathroom
Yes,
cleaning.
you do.
Yes, in our big buildings, we will have a schedule for our communal bathrooms, and I envision, just doing math, we'll be able to clean those 3 to 4 times a day. Same thing. We have specialized equipment that we can go in and clean a bathroom pretty quickly and efficiently and effectively. And when I say that, I mean under 10 minutes, and have that bathroom back in operation. I'll work with our principals as far as passing times and when we're going to do that for our communal bathrooms. I am going to have conversations with our elementary principals, because many of our elementary classrooms have bathrooms in them. I see that a little different because it's used by a single cohort. So at a minimum, they would be cleaned at the end of the day, but we would have to see how we would want to handle that during the school day, because obviously we don't want to disrupt class either. So it may be tied to they're going down to get their lunch, or they're at recess or something like that. So we will work on those schedules as well. All of our buildings, every classroom is going to be outfitted with spray disinfectant and wipes for our staff to use, as well as same thing. We have specialized equipment that will be coming around at the end of each day to wipe down high touch areas, our desks, door handles. We will be going back into the bathrooms in the evenings. There's been questions about staffing with our buildings not having outside use. That will allow our custodial staff much more time to concentrate on the disinfecting of our buildings versus in the past, because we don't have continuing ed or outside groups coming in or using our buildings or anything like that. So I'm confident we will be able to properly maintain our buildings.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Nooney. I'm going to turn now to some health and safety questions that we received. And one of the questions had to do with requiring children to wear masks for a long period of time. And I'm wondering, either Tim or Mary, if you want to start, like, why is wearing a mask important in the first place? And is this an appropriate thing to ask of children while they're at school?
It's, I mean, there are a lot of potential chronic problems with having to face a pandemic. Obviously, you know, a lot of things could happen that affect children in the long run, which is kind of what that question was built around. But in the short run, as we go back into school, we want to focus on trying to reduce the chances for people to get COVID-19, obviously. And wearing a mask is one of the best ways to prevent that spread from person to person. So just, you know, at the onset, we have to be very strict about the various rules that we have in place. And that's all about reducing those chances of COVID-19.
All right, thanks, Tim. Mary, maybe you can talk a little bit about the, I mentioned in the presentation that we will be having families attest to the health of their children before they come to school. So taking their temperature, making sure they don't have any symptoms related to COVID. And if they do, you know, please stay home, feel better before you come back. Can you talk a little bit about what that process is going to look like? First of all, if we have a child who hasn't completed the attestation, and then what if a child or an adult begins to exhibit symptoms during the school day?
Sure. So we're going to be utilizing a BOCES type program that will be pushed out every morning to families so that they can, you know, document that they've checked their child's temperature and they've gone through a series of questions. There will be a person that will be monitoring, you know, the returns as far as who has not completed that. And then we will have to, you know, bring that student down and get their temperature checked and go through the questions with them. So if someone is not feeling well at school and they're sent down to the nurse's office, one of the things that the nurses are asking is that the teacher notifies them ahead of time that the student is on their way down to the nurse's office. This allows the nurse appropriate time to get PPE on and be ready to receive that child. Based on, you know, the assessment of the child and what symptoms they're presenting with, they would be taken to our isolation room, which is a separate room. Parents would be notified right away and really encouraged to come quickly. We've kind of set a half-hour time frame so that that child would be picked up, you know, promptly and not have to spend a fair amount of time in that separate space. And at that time, the parent would be notified that we would request that they take that child to the doctor for an evaluation. And then it would proceed from there.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. So Mrs. Knowles, I'm going to call on you because all of these topics that we've been talking about can easily cause stress and anxiety and worry. And you were the co-chair of our subcommittee that worked on social and emotional well-being. And I'm wondering if you can share with our community some of the recommendations and resources your committee has been working on.
Certainly, our committee has been very dedicated and very busy this summer because we recognize that the mental health and wellness of our students and staff is a high priority as we look toward reopening. So the committee had several recommendations, and we're making available resources and referrals to address any mental health, behavioral, or emotional needs of our community. We're providing time for teachers to develop relationships with students and emphasize that upon transition. So our delayed opening is really supportive of giving the teachers time and students time to develop relationships. We will be reviewing and revising our comprehensive counseling plan as needed and ensuring we have appropriate intervention supports for students who are struggling. Our committee also has developed a series of webinars for our staff that looks at building resilience and addressing any needs of students coming in, as well as self-care. It's important we're all taking care of ourselves during this time. And we'll be updating our website with a list of community supports and resources, and developing information for families about what to expect when coming back to school. So we're really trying to provide a wealth of resources to our families and our faculty and staff and students to support their return to live or remote instruction.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your committee work. That's been tremendous. Next, I want to turn to nutrition, and we have a question, Megan, about how do I know that the food served at the cafeteria is safe for my child?
Sure. So during when we were out of school because of COVID, all of our staff was retrained in Serve Safe, which is a nationally recognized program about the food safety, making sure that foods are cooked to proper temperatures, washing hands, proper food storage protocols. So they all have been retrained on that. And then in the 3 days of superintendent's conference days, when the staff will be in the buildings, they will all be updated and trained on COVID training, on proper food service during COVID, and a variety of other new updated training resources to make sure that any food going out of the cafeteria is safe. Also, as Dr. Wiles mentioned before, we have trays that have lids on them, which will reduce contact once the food leaves the cafeteria, and any other food that leaves our cafeteria will be wrapped or in a container.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Here's another question. This is a little bit of a change here, but Mr. Winans, can I go back to you to talk a little bit more about music? We have a family that's wondering if they should cancel their rental agreement on their cello that they rented, and another who's wondering about instrumental lessons, not lessons, but select ensembles and other kinds of ensembles.
Okay, so the answer is definitely don't cancel the rental agreement. We are still doing instrumental lessons at all levels. So 4th grade lessons, so for those 4th graders who are starting for the first time, we are still offering lessons for both in-person and remote students. So we've got, I think, a good plan to get students started on their instruments. It's obviously going to be a little bit more of a challenge remotely, but we're going to do it. And so definitely don't cancel those rental agreements. Stay signed up. I promise it will be worth it. As far as select ensembles, some of those extracurricular musical ensembles, we are still working out the details of those. In general, a lot of our extracurriculars that lend themselves to being able to be virtual across the district are going to be virtual. It's a little bit more difficult for things like music and drama. And so we're still kind of discussing how we want to do those, because there's some challenges regarding busing. Because of the 4-tier bus system, we don't have access to buses in the way that we had in the past. So we're still looking at how can we offer these ensembles in an equitable manner.
All right, thank you, Bob. So I'm going to switch again back to a remote learning question. And this is actually a question about staffing, and I'm going to turn to Mr. Johnson. So we noted earlier that at least K through 8, we have staff who have been identified for teaching remote only groups of students. Can you share with everyone the process by which we selected those staff members?
Sure can. Thank you, Dr. Wiles. So when we receive a request for an accommodation, we send those off to our district physician, Dr. Silverman, and Dr. Silverman assesses those and gives his recommendation. So those were where we started. Those staff members who had a underlying health condition that, in Dr. Silverman's opinion, needed a accommodation inclusive of remote instruction. That's where we started. We also had staff members who reached out to us with other issues. And so ultimately that's where we landed. There were some positions at the elementary school where we needed to approach people looking for to fill some positions that were not quite filled. There were 4 sections per grade in the elementary. And so those people were approached based on their skill set and their prior use of technology and remote success from the spring. And same with the middle school. Right now, we're assessing the accommodation requests from the high school. High school is a little bit more of a challenge because of the schedule, because of some of the classes that are taught, the electives, the Singleton classes. So we're working through that right now, but that's how we came up with our remote teachers.
All right, thank you so much, Regan.
You're welcome.
One more question that I'll just mention that came through. There was an article in the Times-Union this morning, and we had one of our community members say in a question that it seemed like some of the information in the article was different from what that individual has heard directly from us. And I'm just going to say to all of our community that you should come directly to the district for the information about our plan, because we don't write the articles for the local media outlets. So if you have questions about how we are handling the reopening of schools, please come to our information sources on our website. So we are near the end of our time. And Amy, I'm wondering if we had any additional questions that came in during our conversation here.
Sure, we had only a couple, so that's a good sign. There was one specifically, this must refer to some of the supply lists that are up. Specifically, Bob, this will be for you. It says, if bandanas are not allowed, why does the music teacher want students to bring one?
I believe that they're going to be as part of their personalized percussion kit for grades K through 5. So they're being asked for a pencil box, 2 unsharpened pencils, headphones, and a scarf or bandana. And the vocal general music teachers are hard at work making personalized percussion instruments for over 2,000 students, so that we can have a variety. Every student has a variety of different musical timbres that they can utilize, so that we can make some sort of music in those music classes where we can't have singing right now because of safety concerns and needing to have 12 feet of social distance for singing, and when our cohorts are distanced at 6 feet. So so they're working hard to adapt their curriculum and create instruments so that we can do as much as we possible and keep students progressing musically.
So those bandanas are not face coverings.
Correct. They are not face coverings.
We probably just revealed the big surprise of what they're for then. Okay, one more that we definitely got here. This was about remote only teachers. So it says, it sounded like Mr. Laster was stating that a student who is remote only, they could be assigned to the same class as an in-person student. Is that correct?
So we have enough remote learners in the middle school that not only do we have to create full remote teams, but we have some teams who will have some homerooms that are live in person and some homerooms that are remote. Those teams will, in effect, be able to instruct one class live, and instead of the next class being live, the next class would be remote.
Okay. Any others, Amy?
One more. Hold on one second. Says, if a student who opted for in-person classes gets quarantined and can't make it to school, can they switch to remote learning for that period?
We had actually a number of questions along those lines. And I'm going to say to be determined for folks who are asking that. I think we're just trying to figure out the basic schedule right now. And we may be able to get to some of those nuances as we're a little bit further along. But that's a great question.
Can I sneak in one more, Marie? Just one more?
You've got it.
Okay. How early can high schoolers be dropped off?
Well, ideally, we would like people as close as they can to the 10 o'clock drop off with buses. Because obviously, if we have large numbers of students dropped off before school starts, there's a chance that students are going to congregate in large groups. And we are still under the guidance that we cannot have more than groups of the size of 49 students or lower. So, but having said that, we are going to have an area set aside at the high school from 9 to 10, where it's going to be supervised by monitors in case students are dropped off early.
Okay. So we are officially out of time, but I'm just going to ask this of the panel. Is there any key piece of information or data point that we didn't cover tonight that you're thinking I forgot about?
Dr. Wiles, there are just two very quick technology questions that I can knock off in about 10 seconds here.
Okay.
One of them was about the model of tablets that we will be utilizing with our kindergarten students. And whomever the parent is that asked that question, we will be utilizing Lenovo 10E Chrome tablets. They've been ordered for all of our K and 1 students. I will say, though, they are not here yet. Technology is quite back ordered at this time. But if a parent is interested, that's what we're looking at. There was another interesting question about, is there a way that a student or a family can essentially project remote learning onto Sling TV or the likes? Or do they have to utilize their Chromebook? They're wondering if they can make the session seem more real or in larger view. And that's definitely a possibility. A rather inexpensive solution is something called a Chromecast. But depending on the inputs on somebody's TV, they may also be able to run an HDMI cable straight from a Chromebook to a TV and make it a full projection if they wish to.
I'm so glad you answered that question, Damien. I still can't use my remote very well. Can I ask you to repeat the name of that make and model of that device one more time for someone who may not have had a pen handy?
Sure. The brand, the make is Lenovo, which is also the brand that we utilize with our Chromebooks. And the model of tablet is a 10E Chrome tablet.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else with any key pieces that I may have missed? All right. Well, I want to thank everyone who tuned in to watch us this evening. We very much appreciate your time and your attention and your great questions that truly do help us fine tune our plan. And I want to thank everyone on the panel for your awesome answers and your humor. And I appreciate this being our 4th presentation of the week. Good job. All right. Good night, everybody.